Hello, this is Stories from Earth. Welcome to my place. Today we're reading Chapter 17, Nutting. One day before her grandmother and aunt came, my fine mother Garofalina told me that she had been invited to a nutting, but as a nutting was so low a pastime, she had half a mind not to go. Her mother, however, told her she would cut such a grand show that she had better go. So she had consented and was going to take me with her. The next morning my mother was up early and awoke me, when the following conversation was held. "Josie, my dear, I think you had better have on your silk dress, as I want you to make a grand show," said my mother. "But," said I, "hadn't I better wear another, as I may spoil it?" "Why, child, what can you be thinking of? Don't you want to make a show?" "Yes, mother, but I had rather take comfort than make a show." "Stop. Do as I have bid you, and say no more about it." In the course of an hour my mother and I had got dressed, and as we descended to the dining room, Garofalina's mother said to her, "My dear, the young misses and masters have all been waiting here some time, and I told them that you were not up yet, and so they waited." "Dear me, how sorry I am," said my mother, in her most affected tone, "to have given these young ladies and gentlemen the affliction of waiting for me." "Not at all," they politely replied. We now started, and as we got out of the door my mother started back and said, "Mercy on me! Haven't you any carriage or barouche for us to ride in? I shall be so extremely and exceedingly fatigued." However, they had not, and so we started along, Garofalina all the time lamenting that she had not got her landau with her, as she would die very soon. In an hour or so we got to the woods, where we sat down to rest ourselves. While thus resting, we heard a very loud screaming, and turning in the direction of the cry, there we saw my mother Garofalina screeching with all her might. "Oh, save me, save me!" she cried. All the boys and girls ran to her and asked her what was the matter. "Oh, the spider, the spider!" she screamed, and upon looking they found a very small spider on her dress, and she, instead of shaking it off, began to scream lustily. I thought my mother was very foolish to make so much ado about a little spider, but I did not tell her so. Garofalina, being rid of the spider, began to gather the nuts with the rest of the party. But then she tore her dress on a bramble bush, and had her veil torn off by the boughs, which accidents made her so ill-humored that they all secretly agreed never to invite her again. As they were going home they saw a drove of cows before them, which made my mother run and scream like a maniac. One of the little girls said that they were her mother's cows, and that if they would come into the cow yard they could see them milked. None of the party hesitated but Garofalina, who said that she did not want to go into a dirty old cow yard. Soon, however, she changed her mind and went. I had seen cows milked at my mother's house, I mean Agnes Earle's, but I enjoyed the scene before me very much. First, half of the girls tried, and then the other half, and then half of the boys, and then the other half. When it came Garofalina's turn, she went about it so awkwardly that it made them all laugh. She spattered a shower of milk upon her dress. The cow knocked her down, and when she got up she was indeed a sight. Her dress and veil were torn and spattered with dirt, and her dress was all covered with spots where the milk had been spattered upon her. When she got home she complained of the ill treatment she had received, and her mother said that she should never go again to a nutting. When I went to sleep that night, I prayed that I might be delivered from such a mother, and be placed in the hands of a better one, who had more sense, and who was not so ill-humored and proud. Early next morning my mother told me sorrowfully that her old aunt and grandmother were coming next week, for which I was quite as sorry as my mother, for I thought that I had enough of troubles. Chapter 18. An Old Maid and a Grandmother. In a week they arrived. The old maid was a quiddling thing, and the grandmother was always saying that she could never get over a cold, and then she would tell how she got it. One day this aunt, her name was Betsy Harper, said to my mother, "Do make your doll's hair curl a little more to the front, and tie her shoestring a little longer, and there, do fix her apron string. I hate to see it touch the placket hole." "Oh," said her grandmother, "never mind, Betsy. If you had such a cold as I have got, I never can get rid of it." "Do stop," said Betsy. This aunt objected to my having my soup eaten so quick. She always allowed herself 5 minutes to have it eaten, and no more nor less. Then I was to hold my spoon just so, and only to put half a spoonful in at a time, for she had known little girls, and she said, why not dolls as well as girls, to be choked in taking a whole spoonful at a time. Nor must I take a quarter of a spoonful, as I would not have my soup eaten in 5 minutes. I am sorry to say that I often wished that this aunt was in the Red Sea, and not very near dry land, but I suppose that it was all meant for my good. One evening there was company, and one lady took me up and said, "This is a beautiful doll. But don't you think that she would be handsomer if she had her hair curled a little closer? And if one of her nostrils was a little better shaped, and if one of her eyes was a little higher and blacker," said Betsy Harper. "I don't know, I'm sure," said the lady. At this moment Garofalina came up and said that if the lady would be pleased to accept of the doll and carry it home to her little girl, that she would be very much obliged to her. The lady thanked Garofalina and said that Amelia would be very much pleased with me. I hoped that my new mother would take good care of me and love me very much. Whether she did or not, you will hear in the next chapter. Chapter 19. Accidents. "Amelia, see what I have brought you," said Mrs. Joyce to her little girl. "What is it, Mother?" "A most beautiful little doll." "Oh, goody, Mother, how glad I am." "Well, my little girl, I am glad to see that you like the doll, but wait till morning and then you can see her plainly." The next day was occupied in admiring me. Her mother said, "Amelia, now you must be very careful of this doll. Her name is Josephine Arnoldson." "Oh, yes, Mother, I shall be very careful of her indeed." But in a week my little mother began to be rather careless of me. She left me all around the house, and very often left me in the barn and woodhouse all night. One day, when as usual she had left me on the sofa, a fat old lady came in and sat on me and broke one of my arms. All the time that she was sitting on me she hurt me dreadfully, and I could not speak, she suffocated me so. After she had gone, my mother found me and said, "Oh, oh, my dear child, how much you must have suffered to have had old Mrs. Jones sit on you, and I do declare if your arm is not broken." Her mother, who stood by, said, "Amelia, she would not have been broken if you had not left her about. In future you must look out where you leave her, and tonight I will get your father to mend her arm." My next accident was thus. Amelia's brother took me by the arm and flung me around the room, and then suddenly let me drop and cracked a piece out of my head. I was taken to a shop where I had my head mended. One can scarcely notice the mark except a little very white spot, whiter than the rest of my body. One day Amelia was washing me, and she held me too near the fire to dry me, when my hair caught, and in a moment was all in flames. I screamed with all my might, and so did my mother, and her nursery maid caught me up and soused me in a basin of water. Such a fright as I was! My hair was all burned off. It was some time before I got over my fright and pain. The next week I was taken to the city, where a barberess made me another wig. One day a large Newfoundland dog took me up in his mouth and run away with me only in fun, but I was terribly frightened. In a day he brought me home again, much to the relief of my mother and myself. My mother told me that she had suffered very much for my absence, and she was going to give me up for lost, for one of her servants said that she had better hunt for me, but after a while she said she couldn't. When her maid came running up with me and said that she had just found me on the front doorstep. In a month I had my right leg broken very badly, but after a while it got well again. My mother carried me out to walk, when the same dog snatched me away and took me to my present mother. Chapter 20. Conclusion. My new mother's name was Violet Lagrange, and she was very much pleased with me, and showed me all around the house. Everyone else seemed pleased with me too, especially Lily, her younger sister, who patted the dog and called him a real good dog, and many other names. The place where I now live is called Lagrange Place, and is a most beautiful mansion house with parks and everything else befitting such a splendid place. My new mother made me dresses and got me a little house in which I can live. I think I never shall have any other mamma, for she told her little sister that she should have me when she is herself too old to play with me. I have formed an acquaintance with another doll who lives a little way from here. Her name is Maria Poppet, and her mother is Lucy Ashbourne, the most intimate friend of my mother. For Maria I entertain a most lively friendship, and when our mammas are playing round, we relate to each other our adventures. Maria's adventures you may read in a volume entitled The London Doll. I now close, hoping that my readers will find as much pleasure in reading my adventures as they have had in reading Maria's.